Okay, hello to Wednesday people. Hello to all of you. I already said hello, but now it's my formal hello because I'm being recorded. Go ahead and get your reading questions out. We read about the 100 Years' War. Let's see, I may want a marker, so I'll just get one out in case. Oh, I guess you guys have one. Which went on a little over 100 years, actually, but not all the time. Does that make sense? So there were spurts of battles, and then there was a lull, and then there were more spurts of battles. But wait, now I need to find there we go, questions. The first, here, I'm sorry, I'm in a different place and I'm all discombobulated this morning. Also, I think I might be having a little bit of Christmas distraction, Christmas fever, you know. Thinking of, I made my fudge yesterday. It's always the entry level, you know. Things are really happening when you make the fudge.
We don't make fudge. Yeah, we don't need
Tomorrow I make
we like doing anything ahead of Christmas.
these little balls of cookie dough, except it's got sweetened condensed milk in it instead of eggs, because you know some people don't want to eat cookie doughs because they're raw eggs, which
But like raw flour.
I know raw flour is really the bad thing, but neither of these things scare me. I don't know. Anyway, these are chock full of raw flour, Natalie. Anyway, I make little balls with little tiny chocolate chips. They're like little chocolate cookie dough, and then I dip them in chocolate. And then these little truffles.
There's one thing where it's Oreos blended with cream cheese, and then they're molded into balls and then dipped in chocolate.
Oh yeah.
And they're like cold. So it's very nice.
Oh yeah. Okay. Maybe if we have time at the end, we'll just go around and share the favorite Christmas treat that your household makes. But I want to make sure we don't run out of time here. So no writing. No writing over Christmas. I am going to ask you to do some reading. Hopefully it will be entertaining and interesting reading. And you know, what if we get a snowstorm and you've got your Christmas cookies, right? And you've got your cocoa or whatever, and you can just curl up with a G.A. Henty book? Yeah. And maybe everybody will leave you alone because, see, here's the thing. You can say, I'm doing my schoolwork for Mrs. Ferguson, leave me alone. See, and then you can just, I'm sorry, I can't do that. I have to do my schoolwork.
I have like 4 books from the library.
That's true. I guess I thought you were talking to your parents more than 2-year-old, but okay. So we have talked about the tension between England and France, right? William the Conqueror came from France. So that meant the King of England was now a vassal of the King of France, which is kind of weird. And then to aggravate the situation, we have all these kings of England marrying princesses from France who bring land with them. And so now sometimes the King of England owns more of France than the King of France. It's very weird. Then we have angry kings of England when they're losing parts of France, right? So King Richard went over there and died fighting to take back a castle that the French had taken away from him. John, his brother, before he was king, was conspiring with the King of France to overthrow so they have this long, dysfunctional, we would say, relationship, the rulers of England and the rulers of France. But, and I guess it was the easiest question possible, the first question, what 2 countries? I hope after that introduction, everyone knows it's England and France fighting in this war. I wanted to sum up. Dorothy Mills sums it up on page 337 here. The English won most of the battles in the 100 Years' War, but in the end they were driven out of France. They had gained little or nothing by the long years of fighting. That's just one of the most depressing statements you can possibly read. All those people who died and all the ravaging happened in France, right? The French weren't attacking England. They weren't rampaging in England. The English kept coming back and attacking France. For nothing. For nothing. So, first round was King Edward III. I'm going to use this to hold this open. King Edward III claimed the throne of France. Now, France had this kind of strange law called the Salic Law, and it stipulated who could be king. But one of the rules, Natalie, you're not going to like this, is you couldn't be descended through a woman. You couldn't, so if you were doing your family tree, you know, and you were deciding who, and I believe that Dorothy Mills puts a family tree in here. Isn't there a family? Yeah. So, which I'm not, you don't have to study the family tree or anything, but it's to show that Edward actually is descended through a female line from a king of France. But he says, you know what, Salic Law, I'm the Salic Law, don't care. I have a better, sorry, I'm now distracted, especially by that the really large, furry-footed chicken is just gorgeous. Really like that one.
No.
Oh, that's sad.
Are the chickens, are the chickens stew eventually? Yeah, the chickens are, the chickens are stew eventually, he says. See, ours is in that category, but I don't have the heart. Okay, so back to England. Edward, actually there was all of this stuff is simplified. I'm not going to go through all the nuances, but actually Flanders was trying to get France to get out of their business for their trading, and they convinced Edward III to claim the throne so they could keep France busy. There's a bunch of behind the scenes. But Edward III claimed the throne, and Edward had a son, and he is known as the Black Prince of Wales. And I think because he had black armor, I believe it is because his armor was black, which was just very threatening. And he was awesome. He was just super, I mean, I don't know if he was a nice guy, awesome, but he was tremendous on the battlefield. So England invaded France. Oh, you know what? I'm going to skip that over because it's not so important. England invaded France, and they fought a huge battle at a town called Crecy.
So crazy.
It was crazy at Crecy. And I asked you which army was largest.
France.
Which army won? England. What weapon made it possible?
The longbow?
The longbow. And let's just hit the fourth question. And what gunpowder? What weapon was used the first time? Gunpowder. So the English had developed the longbow. They had crossbows, right? And they had normal bows, and do you know, like, you seem like you're up on, both of you, medieval warfare. Do you know anything about longbows?
Kind of, sort of, yeah, I know that they were really powerful.
Yeah, because I was going to look this up and I forgot. So a longbow, it's legitimately long. It's as tall or taller than the guy. So we have a picture. So for you, the Wednesday people, I emailed this to your parents. It's attached to the email that I sent them. But I have this picture. It's a medieval picture of the Battle of Crecy. It probably, I'm going to pass it around so you can see better. It probably doesn't.
Oh my gosh, I thought this dude was shot in the butt.
Yeah, it does look like that, doesn't it? The bows here, they don't, of course there isn't good perspective here,
What's the difference?
but here,
They're longer and
they're longer, so I don't,
What is being longer?
No, well, it's more like, I forget where I heard. Yeah, I don't know where I heard this, but it could go, I don't know if this is correct or not, through a soldier's foot, through his horse, through his foot, and come out the other side.
oh yeah, it could go through armor. So I think, Addison, although science is not my strong suit, okay, but the increased length gives extra power when you pull back on the string, and so the force with which the arrow is released, gives it so much power that it can A, go a lot farther, and B, go through things that regular arrows can go. So this is a physics question. If you have family members, that are interested in physics, and there's a limit. You know, obviously, how far, how much. I mean, to me, it's obvious. I don't. Maybe I'm misguided, but so the farther you pull it back, the more tension there's going to be on it, the more energy it's going to release when you release it. But when your bow is small, there's a limit to how far you can pull it back. So the longer the bow, the more you can pull it back, and then the more energy is released. Although if you see, I may be babbling because I don't know the physics, but it was amazing. It was amazing. So the English had invented this, and they knew that it almost made armor worthless. Almost. Not quite. English longbowmen also, I think we've talked about this before, you could shoot arrows extremely rapidly. You know, we think, okay, so here's my quiver, you know. So I have to get my arrow, and I have to get boom, and then I have to reach and get one, boom, and then and obviously I could do this pretty fast. So if you've seen, you know, Legolas in the Lord of the Rings movies or whatever, but they did some research, and they found, I saw this in a PBS show, they found an old woodcut engraving of an archer, a longbowman, and he had multiple arrows in his hand at the same time. And they started experimenting with it. You could practice, and you could take multiple arrows, and then you could boom, 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 because you didn't have to reach back between every single one. And I feel like my husband showed me a YouTube video. If I look this up and find it, I will email it to everybody, because some of you might find it interesting. So some modern people, they had a longbow, and they were practicing with this to see, and it was an archer. It wasn't just some guy out in his backyard. They hired a professional archer, you know, to come practice this, to practice taking multiple arrows. And I can't remember how many arrows that guy could shoot in a minute. It was a lot. It was a lot. So you have, it's almost like, not quite like machine gun fire, but it's rapid fire arrows that if you are at the right angle or close enough, that thing will go through your armor.
Also, if you've heard a longbow, like
during the Revolution,
an arrow being fired from
I don't know.
I get that soldier could get 3 rounds per minute.
So the question for those, because I don't think they can hear you, the question is, why didn't the British use the longbows during the Revolutionary War instead of those blasted muskets, which basically just spewed metal stuff in the general direction of the enemy? I mean, they weren't even very aimable. Yeah, it's just I blow shrapnel at you and hope it hits you, versus, and you know, maybe that's a cautionary tale that when we get new technology,
we don't want to go back.
when we get new technology, we don't want to go back. But sometimes, not always, I'm not anti-technology per se, but sometimes you have to ask yourself what it's replacing, and is it more effective than the thing it's replacing? And musket, I mean, the time period that it took to load between, what, if you could get off 2 shots in a minute, 3 shots in a minute, you were good, right?
That's what the Civil War ones too.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, the Western Columbus's time where
Anyway, I have no answer for that. Why weren't they just shooting longbows at the colonists? We might all be British now. They'd been shooting longbows at the colonists.
Maybe
And
it's
they
just
were glad.
easier. Easier shooting a musket instead of like holding all those arrows in your hand and firing them out.
You know,
and
and
like-
lining up in a
but
line
didn't they have
and
to,
just
like-
getting shot down.
but you know, another thing is you have to have the people trained in it, right? Yes, they're wandering.
I'd rather train a ton of guys to do that than lose
I
a
would,
ton of
because
guys.
if the enemy's also using muskets.
What if some of them were thinking about it and they like consulted the person in charge, you know, and he said no because most of the people weren't trained for that. or the people who were, he didn't want them to go out there trying this new technique and then fail.
And then fail.
Get it taken over.
You know, and also I just want to mention that this is the kind of the end of the 100 Years' War is 1453. And so this is over 240 years, 230 years later that we're talking about. So that's a big, everybody who was familiar with it, with the rise of gunpowder, has died, you know. I don't know. It's a really good question. But it was a very effective weapon, and the people who were well trained at it could shoot those arrows off just like gangbusters. So the English came to France, and they just mopped the floor with the French, as they say. It was not good. Dorothy Mills mentions it, the terrible longbow. And I asked you what was used the first time, and you answered gunpowder. She says the Battle of Crécy was the beginning of the end of feudal fighting. It is said that gunpowder was used probably for the first time in a medieval battle. When you can blow people up, and we're not talking about necessarily muskets, it's a whole new thing. When you can blow up the castle, it's not, you don't really do a lot of hand-to-hand sword fighting anymore when you can blow people up from a distance. Make sense? Things are going to change, and if they're going to blow you up, the armor isn't going to help. You'll blow up your armor too. So things started to change after that. But Edward the Black Prince was the scourge of France. He was, you know how they have various stories of people that you scare your children with? If you're not good, so-and-so will come and get you. You're like horrified. Who would say that to their child? So, you know, the boogeyman or whatever. But in various periods of history, they say that whoever was the great evil villain on the enemy side was the person they would scare you with. So once upon a time, it was the guy named Hannibal, who was Carthaginian, and he had come across the Alps to attack Italy, and the Romans would say, if you're not good, Hannibal will come and get you. But in this case, it was, if you're not good, the Black Prince will come and get you. He was like the boogeyman. Do you know? He was like a larger than life figure that will come and get you. Don't ever do that to your children or siblings. That's just
like
mean.
we all did though. It was my brother's idea. So
it got so bad for France that eventually the King of France was actually captured. Did you read that part? Captured and brought to England and held under guard. Not really. They were very nice to him. They gave him nice food, and he had a nice place to live and everything, and they were waiting to ransom him. But the Black Prince died, not in battle, from illness. And during the same time, this is what you're going to read about, this nice festive topic over Christmas, the Black Death, the plague. The plague also was ravaging England and France. So obviously when people are dying in great numbers, there's not a lot of battle because you don't have enough people to go out and fight because they're all sick. This created a lull. But the Black Prince, I don't know that he died of the plague, but he died. And there was a lull in the fighting. But this Battle of Crécy, this battle where the French, although superior in numbers, were just not annihilated, because that means they were completely wiped out, but they were beaten very, very badly by the English. This was notorious for generations in France. The horrible, horrible destruction of Crécy. So, moving on. We had, let me see if I want to talk about this. Now I'm actually going to gloss over some of this that you read because it's just not as important. The Black Prince died in 1376. His death was followed the next year by that of Edward III, his dad. The new King of England, Richard II, was 9 years old. And for a time, though England and France were hardly at peace, there was at least a truce to violent hostilities. In the meantime, in England, things were a mess. Part of the reason they didn't attack again was because Richard II was an idiot. I don't like to say he was an idiot. He was not, he was a fool. Thank you, Natalie. Richard II happened to be a fool.
Are you talking about when he was still a kid?
No, we're talking about when he grew up. What happened? Do you remember the story in the Bible? You know, Solomon had a son named Rehoboam. And when Solomon, and there's lots of Boams in the kings, Jeroboam, Rehoboam. So Rehoboam became king after Solomon, his dad, died. And Rehoboam had grown up in the palace. And Rehoboam had buddies, that had noble buddies who had grown up with him. So the people came to Rehoboam and said, your dad taxed us pretty heavily. Your dad was, the burden was hard on the people. Would you lighten it? Okay, so Rehoboam went to his dad's counselors, the older men, and said, what should I say? And they said, you know what, if you're kind to them, they will be loyal to you forever. Okay, duly noted. Then he went to his peeps, his friends that he'd grown up with. And he said, what should I say? And he said, you tell them that your dad's thigh was like your little finger. All right?
The thigh. What?
Because thighs are big and little fingers are small.
Say like arms. If he was buff.
Just let it go.
I'm sure he could say
All right? So, my dad's little fingers, look, I don't remember, okay? But the comparison was, if my dad was one, I'm going to be the other, all right? If you think he was bad, I'm going to be even worse. I'm going to tax you, I'm going to make you people toe the line. And they promptly, and this was in God's plan also, 10 of the tribes just revolted. And that's when we get Israel and Judah. We get two kingdoms. Because Rehoboam was a jerk. Richard II was like that. He had a bunch of guys that he grew up with, and they basically told him to oppress people, and he wasn't a good ruler. Finally.
Who does that ever sound right to? What?
I know. It seems like if you are king or queen, you would be wise enough to know that if you cultivate people's love, they will be loyal to you, and if you cultivate their hate, they will come after you eventually. I know. So this happened to Richard II. So obviously they're not fighting. The reason I'm telling you this story is they're not fighting in France because all this is going on in England. Richard II is overthrown. He actually takes away a nobleman's property. While the nobleman, there was a duel, and Richard II was mad that these two noblemen were dueling. One of them was related to him. And he banished them. And then he promptly just took the guy's property while he was gone, which was, no. Just because I'm banished doesn't mean you just help yourself to my stuff. That stuff is still mine. I can bring it. So, yeah, but he could have it shipped by friends. Like, that's for his support.
Like property.
Yeah, but also just money. All of the above. He takes it. And so this young man named Henry comes back and he takes the throne. Richard is thrown into prison and turns up murdered. And we don't really know who gave the order, what happened there. This man is named Henry IV. And he had a son named Henry V. Very clever, right? And Henry V is really, really one of the most famous kings in English history. Because Shakespeare wrote an awesome play about him. He actually wrote 4 plays. He wrote a play called Richard II, Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, and Henry V. They all go together. Yes. So, but they were stating who their subjects were. And Henry V was young, not 9 years old, okay? But he was young. And supposedly, this is sort of Shakespeare's version, he'd been kind of a wild boy, you know, like hanging out at the bars and doing all sorts of nefarious stuff. And he had some just questionable friends. And everybody's like, oh, when Henry comes to the throne, he's going to be a jerk. But his dad died, leaves him the throne, and he's miraculously transformed. He shuns his old low-class friends.
That's
And
nice.
you'll have to read the play with me someday. It's heartrending. And he steps up to be king. I mean, he really steps up to the bat, as they say. He is king. He's not playing around. He's doing this. So, all while this stuff had been going on, there's France over there, right? Edward III, Grandpa Edward, great uncle Edward III, had claimed to be king of France, but nothing had come of it, even after the great battle at Crécy. You know, they still hadn't actually taken control of France. Didn't happen. So Henry V says, maybe it's my turn. Maybe I should go. So he's convinced to go, that Salic law, that through the woman thing, we don't care about that. I'm the king of France. So he goes to France, and he goes, it takes some towns, but his men are really worn out. They've battled, they're tired, and he really, all he wants to do is pull back, go back to the coast, and sort of ride the winter out. Just give me a rest, he says to the king of France. Let's just have a truce. The king of France is like, you're related to that black prince. I'm not giving you a rest. This is the time to snuff you out, because you're all tired, your men are tired, and you're hungry, and you're cold, and there's not very many of you, and I can take you out. So, thank you. I should keep this here. The French march out to meet them near a town called Agincourt. And the French just think this is going to be a cakewalk. We are so much more than them. Memo, Battle of Crécy. You were more than them then too. They're worn out. They just want to go home. They asked for leave to just go home because their men were sick and tired. No, we're going to fight. The night before the battle in the Shakespeare play, the men are sitting around the campfires, basically with the idea, we're going to die tomorrow. We're all going to die tomorrow. And the next morning, some other sources other than Shakespeare talk about this, but I'm going to read what Shakespeare has to say. In the play, one of the soldiers says, today's a holiday. Today's St. Crispin's Day, an English saint. Today's St. Crispin's Day. And men at home are just having feasts and parties. And we're on this stinking battlefield. And I wish that just a handful of all the men back in England who are partying today were here to help us. And Shakespeare puts a speech in the mouth of Henry V, which is one of the most famous speeches in all. And I'm going to read it because I can, and it's awesome. I don't get a chance to do this very often. Okay. What's he that wishes so? Who wants more people to come? My cousin Westmoreland? No, my fair cousin. If we are marked to die, we are enough to do our country loss. And if to live, the fewer men, the greater share of honor. God's will, I pray thee, wish not one man more. By Jove, I'm not covetous for gold. Well, that's by God, all right? People say that. People used to say that up until very recently, by Jove. I'm not covetous for gold, nor care I who doth feed upon my cost. It yearns me not if men my garments wear. Such outward things dwell not in my desires. But if it be a sin to covet honor, I'm the most offending soul alive. No faith, my coz, wish not a man from England. God's peace, I would not lose so great an honor as one man more, methinks, would share from me, for the best hope I have. Do not wish one more. Rather proclaim it, Westmoreland, through my host, that he who hath no stomach to this fight, let him depart. You're afraid? You don't want to fight? Tell everybody. You don't want to fight? Go. Go home. Let him depart. His passport shall be made, and crowns for convoy put into his purse. Crowns is money. We would not die in that man's company that fears his fellowship to die with us. This day is called the Feast of Crispin. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named, and rouse him at the name of Crispin. He that shall see this day and live old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors and say, tomorrow is St. Crispin. Then he will strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. Old men forget, yet all shall be forgot, but he'll remember with advantages what feats he did that day. Then shall our names, familiar in his mouth as household words, Harry the King, Bedford and Exeter, Warwick and Talbot, Salisbury and Gloucester, be in their flowing cups freshly remembered. This story shall the good man teach his son, and Crispin shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world, but we in it shall be remembered. We few, we happy few, we band of brothers, for he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother. Be he ne'er so vile, this day shall gentle his condition. And gentlemen in England now abed shall think themselves accursed they were not here, and hold their manhoods cheap, whiles any speaks that fought with us upon St. Crispin's day. Don't wish anyone else is here.
Why doesn't he have a face? There's so much detail. Why doesn't he have a face?
I don't know. It is a little creepy, isn't it?
I had to learn that for school last year. I didn't remember.
There's you can go on YouTube. There's a place that teaches classes much like my classes online, and they had a video contest, and they had students dress up if they wanted to and recite the St. Crispin's Day speech. If you want to memorize something, it's a really good speech. I actually, if we have time, so you guys, Google, YouTube, Kenneth Branagh's Henry V.
I forgot the camera was there. And you were just
Awesome.
like,
No, okay. So, and if we're done, after I shut the camera off, I'll bring it up because there's a great actor, and so anyway, if you want to know more about Henry V over Christmas break, watch the movie Henry V with Kenneth Branagh. Okay, moving on. So, they were at Agincourt. They were tired, and they went out and listened to the tally after the battle. Dead, 8,000 French. 26 English. Now, that's according to the English Chronicles. Some people say a more reliable is more like 1,600,
oh.
but versus
Wait, how much was the first one?
8,000, even if there were 1,600. In the Shakespeare play, there's 26. All right?
That's a lot less.
Yes.
That's a big difference.
So, why?
Wait,
Why?
how many men were there?
Wait a minute.
Maybe it's just 26.
Wait a minute. Why would there be such differences in sources, do you think? Why?
Drama, bias,
Okay, what kind of, first of all, what did you say?
drama. It's like, oh my gosh, there's only 26 men.
Okay, so to dramatize it, to make it, and bias. Okay,
8,000 dead.
so let Addison
So,
fill that
like,
in.
If you're the one that's responsible for setting or for recording what you did, you're gonna do bias. Like you're gonna be biased towards yourself usually. But I mean, to do that much of a difference, like 1,560 or whatever, that's like really not okay.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. And so, the English thought, God is helping us. God is on our side. So they made an arrangement. The King of France says, let's talk peace terms. Okay, we can't have another battle like that. Henry says, all right, I'm marrying your daughter Catherine. Catherine, I'm taking her home with me. And You can stay king of France, but if Catherine and I have a son, our son will be the new king of England and France when he grows up.
But how?
Realms
Why?
together.
What?
They're
Okay,
combining
I'm-
their countries.
Yes, they're combining their countries.
What?
That's no.
Okay, what
Where's
if
the
she
patriotism?
can't have children? What happens then?
Well, it doesn't matter. We don't know what could have happened, but here's what did happen.
She died.
No, they did have a son, Henry VI, and Henry V died when he was still fairly young. When Henry was young and his son was still really young. So we have another one of these situations where we have, illness. It wasn't battle. There's a lot of illness in the Middle Ages. So we have another situation where you have this young king and he has all these regents and managers and everything, and they basically mismanaged things so horribly that they lost all the territory that they had gained in France.
That sucks for them.
It does, indeed. So, next round, next generation. I know they're not giving
I was
up.
thinking
Nobody's.
they were gonna assassinate the child.
No,
so.
no. I'm sorry if it was a letdown. The story of what actually happened. No, it's never good. Is it? I don't want to say this definitively, but isn't this in Proverbs that it's not good for a kingdom to have a when a young king, like an underage king? I'm not sure about that.
That's
Maybe I read it somewhere else. But yes, it's just common sense. And a lot of Proverbs are just common sense, honestly. But it's never good. It wasn't good for England until they undid everything. So, moving on. We have a king in France named Charles, but he is the son of the king who was king, the Agincourt king. All right? So he's the brother of the Catherine who got married off, all right? But he can't get crowned king because even though the English had lost, I said they lost every they didn't lose all the territories. There were still English friendly areas of France, okay? English sympathizers. And Charles was hemmed in by groups of these English sympathizers. So there was a girl, and you guys know this girl. Her name was Joan. And, yeah, which is the French version. But Joan is the anglicized version of her name. And Joan was a very godly young woman, and so I'm just going to tell the story the way it happens. I do not know what to make of her story. I will tell you the honest truth. I don't know what I think of it.
Yes.
I don't not believe it, but it's just, what? So, when she was 12, 13, she started hearing, she called them her voices. But when you say to people now, I'm hearing voices, it kind of sounds like you're mentally ill. But she knew who the people were. One was St. Catherine. Can't remember. Dorothy Mills tells, do you know offhand?
Michael and
Here, since I asked the question. Oh, sometimes it was St. Michael, sometimes St. Catherine or St. Margaret. But the message was always the same. She was to go to the Dauphin. Dauphin. It looks like Dauphin in your book.
I said
That means
dolphin.
the prince. Like dolphin. It's not a dolphin. It's what the French call their prince. Okay. Was to go to the Dauphin Charles, who had not yet been crowned king, and help him to recover his land. There was pity in heaven, said her voices, for the fair realm of France. So, her dad says, are you kidding me? I don't think so.
He said he would drown her before he left.
Yeah,
That
he was
terrible.
a little, I was making it sound nice, wasn't I? No, that's all right. Go for it. I'll drown you. I'd rather see you dead than disgrace yourself. But by the time she's 17, she gets an uncle to take her. And the story is that word had gotten around about this girl, teenage girl. Remember, just teenage girl, from a poor family from out in the middle of nowhere who claims that God is sending her to put the king on the throne and drive the English out of France. So the king and his court decide to test her. So they all sit down. Okay, you're all sitting down, and Andrew is the king. All right, but they dress John up like the king.
Oh yeah.
All right, and he just dresses up like a courtier, and they put him on the throne, and you just mingle with the crowd. Because she claimed, I don't have to have met him, I will know him. She walks up, looks at him, turns away, and looks around the crowd, and walks straight up to the king. And says, did you not think I would know? So test number 1, she passes with flying colors, right? She's got some sort of guidance. And so she actually, yeah, whoa. Okay, hold on. Yes. But she convinces him to give her an escort, an army, to come with him, be crowned. Now, supposedly, her mission was this. This was her mission. Put a crown on the king. However, she became very popular. She's like a mascot. But I mean that in the best possible way. Not because when we say mascot, that sounds really degraded to us, like she's dressed up as a big animal or something. She was a symbol. That's better than calling her a mascot. She was a symbol of God's care for France. And you know what? The soldiers, the common rank and file soldiers, believed in her. They believed in her. And so, you know how, when you really believe in something, it gives you extra confidence. When you believe you have the ability to do something, it almost creates in you the ability to do it. Now, I'm not insinuating that she didn't have help from God or that their army didn't have help from God. I just don't know. I don't know what to make of this story. But I do know that in addition to that, just her presence made the soldiers feel bold because they had her. Like, she's invincible. She's
The teenage girl?
the teenage girl. I know, the teenage girl. But here's the weird thing about this teenage girl. With no formal training of any sort, she had a strategic mind. So she could tell the generals, you need to put somebody there and somebody. She could lay out the battlefield. Everybody says, how does she know? How was she so good? She just was. She asked a couple of times, now my job is done. Can I go? No, yeah, we're not going to let you go home. So there was a huge city, France, Orleans. It looks like Orleans. New Orleans is named for Old Orleans, but in France it's called Orleans, all right? And Orleans was being besieged by the English. She took an army, and she drove off the English and lifted the siege of Orleans. After that, they weren't going to let her go. You know what I mean? Like, can I go home now? No. Yeah, but my voices say that my job is done. No. You stay. You're golden. We are invincible with you. All right? So they fight. Eventually she's wounded. She recovers. But things don't go well in one of the battles. By the way, I'm going to give you a lot of details, and you might say, how do we know this? Joan is going to be put on trial, and the trial is going to go on for months, and we have transcripts of the trial. We know everything that was testified to. We know a lot about Joan of Arc's life, actually. She profited because of the trials, because they wrote down what she said, because they asked her these questions, and she told her story. So she said, I'm going to get wounded. She did, recovered. Then another battle, she said, we don't want to do this. This isn't going to end well. You'd think after all her being right times, they would believe her. You know, you're a teenage girl. She got captured. She got captured by the English in that battle, and they put her in prison. And like, we have their golden talisman. We have Joan. Now, what are we going to do with her? What can we do to get rid of her and to break the spirit of the French, right? Now, one would think that Charles, the man who she found cowering behind, surrounded by the English, that she led out, put the crown, I don't know that she, with her own hands, put the crown on, you know, but had him crowned, led his forces. You would think he would send a delegation to the English, right, to bargain for her release. This girl saved France. Maybe I should help her. Nothing.
Maybe he thought he, like, the whole time the stuff that she was really creepy and, like, demonic or something, so he was kind of like, the whole
We
thing
don't
is
know
creepy.
because he never talked about it.
Figured out why France didn't like.
Well, because
Witch
she was
trial.
just so helpful.
Yeah, but like when she was like, "That guy's the king," I just know the voices tell me.
Well, they did. Here's what they did, Natalie. Actually, they had churchmen examine her. So take her, you know, and ask her questions about her voices and decide whether or not this was demonic or this was from God. And they decided that her theology was good, that her understanding of God and the Bible was good, and that this wasn't. And of course, they wanted it to be true because she was going to help France. I'm not saying they weren't biased, but it wasn't like they just, oh yeah, let's just follow this girl who says she hears. They had her tested, questioned by various church officials before they decided to. I don't know.
I mean, for
But
her
the,
to
but the
know
thing
this
is,
stuff,
she did it. She did it. So I'll tell you my problem I have with it. Well, maybe I'll ask you because okay. So Natalie, just in case, so Natalie says maybe she was schizophrenic, like maybe she's hearing voices, and just because you hear voices doesn't mean they're not right. Do you know what I mean? That they don't tell you something accurate. Yeah.
So for her, I don't think, so schizophrenic is where you just like, are just kind of crazy.
Well, yeah, it's a mental illness, but often you hear voices.
Yeah, okay, so, but they were like pathetic. So like,
Yes.
she got injured, and you know, she had the king, and she got captured and stuff. So I don't think it was just a natural thing. I think it was probably like, I mean, you know, like a spiritual thing, but I don't
Yes.
know if it was from God.
And then the thing, and then that problem is that they never told her to do something bad. Do you know what I mean? Well, let's hold on to that. You can think about that. Anyway, here's what the English did with her. They did decide to try her as a witch, and I already told you they had, the English did, and there was a very lengthy trial. They tried as hard as they could to make her contradict herself, to stumble over herself. And in the meantime, so, you know, it's hard to ride a horse and wear armor in a dress. It just is. So she had cut her hair and she had worn pants, worn men's clothes. All right? Which was a no-no back then. But the Church of France, the Archbishop, had given her special dispensation. This isn't a wicked thing to do. You've been given a special job by God. And it requires you to not have to stuff all your hair in a helmet and stuff your dress in armor. This is your mission from God. So wear the clothes. Yes.
How old was she during her English trial?
She died when she was 19. So 18, 19.
All this happened in 2 years.
Oh yeah. So they tried to get her to mess up, and she didn't. And then they brought English churchmen in to say she was wicked because she was wearing men's clothes. And they took away. They asked, "Would you wear the dress?" She's like, "Okay." So she takes off the men's clothes, and she has underwear, you know. But they
There?
don't. What?
She had to do it there?
Yeah, in the prison.
Oh,
But
okay.
no, not in the
Okay,
courtroom,
like
but in the
court.
prison. And then they don't bring her the clothes, the dress, and there's guards around. she's not immodest, so finally she just wants to put the men's clothes back on. At one point they say, we're going to burn you at the stake, and she, understandably in fear, says, okay. And by this time she's been in prison for months. She's tired. They even sent a guy into the prison acting like he was a friend, acting like he was a priest that she could confess to get information out of her, so he could use it for the trial. But she just never, she never, trying to think of the word, why can't I, sometimes words don't come anymore, implicated herself in any wrongdoing, but she was exhausted from the whole thing. Finally she's like, give me the paper, I'll sign it. And then she changed her mind. Like, no, I recant my recanting because I didn't do anything wrong. I did what God told me to do. Addison, what is your comment?
Well, when you said like she never like admitted it, and then you said that, but is that where they said that she did say that her voices were not from God, and then she changed her mind?
Yes. Yes. She's, I'll admit to anything. And of course, this is a slap in the face to her voices if they are actually saints talking to her. And so finally, they take her out, and she asks for a cross. Somebody finds 2 sticks, and they bind them together and make her a little cross. And they burn her at the stake. Charles never does anything to help her or save her. But at this point, the 100 Years' War has been going on for over 100 years. The French have rallied and taken back most of their, oh, and by the way, I was going to give you this. I've got this attached to the emails that are going out to you. This shows you various holdings. So, you know, what's held by England in 1328, then what's held in 1360. By 1429, see how it's spread? And then by 1453, only the port of Calais. It goes back and forth. Just take one and pass it around. Here, actually.
This is what they held in France?
Yes, yes. So this is a map of France showing what England owns at various time periods, all right? By 1453, the English had been driven out again with Joan's help, and all they own is that port of Calais.
That is like such a huge difference.
Yes, it is.
In like 20 years.
Yes, and Joan is responsible for a lot of that.
For losing it? Or
For the French driving the English out.
Yeah.
Yes, right. Here's my assessment of Joan of Arc. This is only opinion. I have no problem believing that God spoke to Joan, because God does this. God can use people as he wishes. My problem is, well, okay, so this is my mind wandering a little bit. On the one hand, I have a problem with God saying, I love the French more than the English, and so I want the French side to win.
I thought it was because England was going to change over from Catholic to the Church.
No, that didn't happen until like over 100 years later.
Yeah, but if they would have still owned France, and France still won.
Okay, so I just want to, because I can't hear you on the, so he said, you know, we're going to have the English Reformation, so this is 1450-ish by 1550, so 100 years later they are going to be Protestant. And so maybe if England had owned France, then France also would have fallen to Protestantism. Which it eventually, I mean, on the one hand, that's a cool theory, but on the other hand, the fact that it doesn't leads to massive wars. You know, the Huguenot wars and all of this that are going to happen, the religious wars. But you bring up a good point, and it's this. On the one hand, I feel like, does God care who wins, England or France? And on the other hand, I say, yes, Dad, God does care. Because God is in charge of all of history, and God is in charge of kingdoms, and the Bible says he gives them to whom he will. For his own purposes that I am not privy to, because I am not God. He doesn't send me memos about his plans. So did God in his providence say, it is time for France to rise and England to be driven out, and I am going to raise up? It is like God, isn't it, to choose a teenage girl, to choose fishermen, poor fishermen, to spread the gospel all over the world, to choose the weak, to shame the strong. It is how God operates, isn't it? The most unlikely ones are the ones he uses, right? My strength is made perfect in weakness. Teenage girl, nobody believes her. Gonna use her. This will be fun. I don't know. So, but here's the thing. People that read these transcripts, and then I'll finish it and then I will let you have your say. She doesn't contradict herself. She doesn't trip over, but her story always stays the same. This is what happened to me. This is what they said. This is what they wanted me to do, and I obeyed. You know, and you would think someone with mental illness or someone who was just making it up, their story might not be consistent. You know, they wouldn't calmly be consistent, and she was. Okay, Addison, you chime in.
So, I mean, like I said, I'm pretty sure it wasn't mental illness, just because, like, really because, like, prophecy, or, like, the way that what she said worked, and everything that she did, like, everything happened. But, I think that God isn't taught to people like that anymore. Like, that doesn't happen anymore.
Well, and see, that is an opinion. So, so we all in this room come from different faith traditions. And so I try to honor that as much as possible. Like for Catholic or Protestant, like what we're talking here, everything we talk about here is true for everybody, you know, and we all believe that Jesus is God and rose from the dead. But there are faith traditions that would say that is, I don't agree. God does communicate with people.
Is that Catholic?
Catholics would say God definitely. Also,
like audibly though?
I don't know. I mean, I guess.
Did she say that it was audible? Or did I
Especially her voice.
Yeah.
So that's
I think. Yeah, she said it was audible, but other people couldn't hear it.
I feel like that makes me think that she hears in her head or something like that.
Yeah.
Whereas like an actual voice.
Of course, there were times like now, where they said when Paul was on the road to Damascus, you know, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And then some of his companions said they saw the light, but they didn't, or they heard thunder, but they didn't hear a voice. But Saul heard the voice. So his companions didn't, but he did.
Yeah, so I would, like, there's two things that come to mind when you say that. So first, like, you know, that was in the New Testament. Like, that was, like, in part of the Bible, and it happened in the Bible. And then it, other than, like, I mean, have there been other accounts where, like, that we know that are credible, where God has taught?
Well, see, credible, yes, but credible depends on who you believe. Like, so that when there is a visitation of some sort, the Catholic Church has a very rigorous system of investigating these, and a lot of times they say, you know, we think this is genuine. You're free to believe it or not, but we believe this is genuine. Sometimes, like, no, we don't think this is a genuine thing. And this has actually gone back all the way to the Church Fathers. Does God still act the same way among us? And almost all the Church Fathers say no. There's been a diminishing of miraculous happenings, you know, as opposed to New Testament times. But to what extent? You know, and this has been not an argument, because argument sounds, I mean argument in the sense of discussion with opposite sides, not where people are angry or anything, but to what extent does God intervene? I mean, I would say almost all of us, almost all Christians of all faith traditions believe God heals people. Like that, I mean, some don't though. I mean, they're like, no, all these miraculous healings aren't real. They were just medical, you know. But most all of us believe that God can and does reach down, I use that metaphorically, you know, and acts in our world by causing something not natural to happen in a healing.
Yeah.
So there's not a lot of difference between him communicating. Like some people, like in the charismatic tradition, Protestant tradition, would believe more in being given, you know, direct signs by the Holy Spirit. They are more comfortable with that, and so there's this group of people who would be totally okay with Joan of Arc because they believe it happens to them all the time, but not audible, you know, like a Holy Spirit prompting. So it's sort of like it's a continuum. Do you know what I mean? There's a line of, over here is God doesn't communicate at all, and like God's chatting with us every day. And somewhere, and people fall on that line that, you know, like, and how does he do it? Do you hear it? Do you just feel it in your spirit? How do you know it's true? Do you know what I mean? And so, but it is, I agree with you, Addison, in the sense that he doesn't do it often, certainly. And I don't think there's another Joan of Arc case. Can you think of another, like, saint called like Joan of Arc was called, like with conversations with saints, leading them in a certain direction?
I mean, I know there's been kind of encounters and things.
Yes.
But not her case. They go out and fight.
Yeah, like this is unique. Her case is unique because she has this. She was commanded to do something secular, military in our world,
Well, actually,
and had great. Can you think of another one that was?
take that back. I forget his name. What's his name? Yeah, I forget his name. I believe it's in the Old Testament. He
They
got
weren't like what y'all consider saints. That wasn't in the Old Testament yet.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
okay, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So another thing is that
Covering up my
like
microphone.
in the Bible, there was the only people that like supernaturally, or you know, like as a miracle, came and communicated with people was an angel or God, or like the Holy Spirit or God. And so that's like, I don't think that like, this is differences in like denominations, but like, you know, talk like saints coming back and talking.
And that is a difference in tradition, because you know the problem we have is that the New Testament stops, and we don't really hear anything about the early church in the New Testament. If you think about it, the church is still being planted. Acts doesn't really tell you about. I mean, we get one line, and they continued in the breaking of bread and prayer, and we don't really get a lot. So we get a lot of our information about what the early church from the writings that we have not included in the Bible. So for that 150 years or so, 200 years after the end of Acts, and some people accept that, and some traditions don't accept that. So
So in those writings, was there like did they claim to have encountered?
I don't know what the earliest one is.
earliest
Like the earliest person who encountered a saint.
oh,
There were early encounters with angelic personages telling them to do. I don't have enough information to answer you, Addison. So I don't want to just,
I know.
Yeah.
That's what I was.
Mhm.
And that's Saint Martin of Tours. He probably was one of the
that's
earliest.
pretty early, but he would have lived in the 700s, 800s. Can you take one of these? If talk to your parents about these things. That's the safest and best way. And follow your parents' guidance in your own faith tradition. I don't think any of us in this room are claiming that saints are talking to us personally. And and I don't know of anyone personally who's had an encounter like this, but Joan of Arc is just a mystery. Not a mystery, because we know so much about her, because she was just so open. Especially, it's like, this is what happened. I'm telling you, this is what they said. This is what happened. This is when it happened. This is how it happened. And the mystery is what's up with that. And one thing is, no one then or since has been able to read or hear what she said and disprove what she claims happened to her. That is something we just all can agree on. Nobody knows, but nobody has been able to say, oh, we figured it out. We know it was this or that. We just don't know. But she did remarkable things. But yes, talk to your parents about, what does our tradition, what does our church teach about, what is the condition of the people who are Christians who have passed on? Are they aware of us? Do they communicate it with us? Do they not? Why does our church believe that? Why do we think that? And have that conversation with your parents. Yes.
So in this account, if people believe that it's true, do they believe that the saint came back from heaven? And sort of like their spirit?
Yes. Because the idea being, we have to remember, and this is going to sound very odd to some of you, dead people aren't really dead. God said, I am the God of the living, not of the dead. Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are not dead.
Yeah.
They're not dead because they're eternally alive. So, then we all agree on that, and then the next step is, so does that mean they know what's going on here? And I think the argument would be, and so some of you, going from a Protestant perspective, the argument on this side would be, the church is one body. And if we cut, right, Paul said the church is like a body, all attached, unified. And he didn't say the parts that die get lopped off and aren't attached to the rest. So we would think, some people would say, then that means we are all unified. We have a connection with all believers who have lived at any time if we are part of the body. So but talk to your parents about it, yes. And then you add some, yes, thank you.
Encounter,
the hour
that Jesus died, the gates of heaven were open. He went down to hell and freed everybody. Then all the saints that were in the graveyard, or wherever, they were buried, they came up and they appeared to people.
Yeah, not all of them, but some of them. Yes, it says dead people were appearing to people in the streets. So that's.
Scientists sounds like the exact date that Jesus died, but people just dismissed it.
What?
Because there was an eclipse when Jesus died, so scientists found the exact date when he died.
It wasn't it was a spirit, or it was God.
Yes, it probably wasn't an eclipse, unfortunately, because it lasted too many hours. But
So,
anyway, but these are all wonderful. Have these conversations at home. Yes, Addison.
So the Bible says just about talking about people coming back from the rich man
And Lazarus.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
he asked if he'd go back and warn his brothers and people, and they said no. And there's not been any evidence in the Bible that people can come back.
Mm-hmm. So I think the answer, and I'm not arguing, I'm just giving you, because you seem to be inquiring, but you should talk to your family and parents and follow them. The answer would be, first of all, when Jesus said that, it was before the harrowing of hell. It was pre-resurrection. It was the pre-resurrection state of affairs, which many believe changed after the resurrection. And I had a second comment, and my train has derailed into the ditch. Hang on. The train is gone.
What did you say? Change. What do you mean change?
The situation so the Jews believed that there was a holding place for all the dead, all right, and they referred to it as Hades. And in the rich man and Lazarus, Hades has compartments, but it is all one area. Okay. People argue, well, how literal is this story of Jesus? Is he describing a real geographical situation, or is it just Obviously, when he says, even if someone comes back from the dead, they won't believe, he's hinting at the fact, I'm going to come back from the dead, and they're still not going to believe. So he's saying that. But the Jews believed there was a place. In Catholic and Orthodox tradition, and this is the earliest writings of the Church Fathers, there's the idea that it says in Peter, 1st or 2nd Peter, can't ever remember, that he descended to the spirits in prison who disobeyed long ago while Noah was building the ark. Like, what the heck? He descended to the spirits in prison who disobeyed long ago? That verse has been expounded upon by the Church Fathers, that Jesus, while he was in the tomb, while he was dead, he went and freed his followers. You might say, well, how could they be his followers if they were Old Testament people? Because everyone in the Old Testament, trusting in God, trusted in what was going to happen for them, right? Abraham and Isaac and Jacob trusted God, which meant they trusted Jesus. And that he literally cleaned hell out, cleaned Hades out of his followers, and took them to paradise. This day you will be with me in paradise.
Does the Bible say that, or is that just what the church?
That's from the, he descended to the spirits in prison who disobeyed long ago, when Noah was building the ark. Peter, 1st or 2nd, look in a concordance. But that has been expounded upon, because this verse is in the Bible. What do we do with it? What does it mean? He descended to the spirits in prison. What? So everything beyond that is interpretation, right? And some people interpret, just like you get a Bible with the footnotes, they've interpreted it for you. They've said, this is what this verse means. But you go to another one and someone else might say, no, this is what this verse means. So it was held that that's what that verse means, that he went and he made an announcement in Hades. I win.
So,
I win. Come on, all you followers of God from all ages, come with me. And that he led them out like a victory train.
did the Jews get that from the Bible, or they just believe that?
That there was a holding place for people. Well, it mentions, because every time it says Sheol or Hades in the Old Testament, that's what they're talking about. The holding place of the dead, where the dead go. And we don't see, it's interesting, when you read the Old Testament, we don't see a lot of, and the dead are rejoicing, and the dead are in glory. It's just, they're in the place of the dead. They're in Sheol, or they're in Hades. That's where they are. We don't know anything else. That seems to have been their understanding. And that is, so whenever, and usually most translations of the Old Testament will say Hades or Sheol. I feel like, I don't think they often say hell. Because it has a different flavor,
so like
you know what I mean?
ESV
Because hell is punishment.
ESV, what we, like at our church,
Uh-huh.
it says hell.
It says hell.
Yeah. So, when Jesus was being crucified, he said to the man on the cross he would see him.
In paradise that day.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know. Maybe the guy went down with him. Maybe because he was if you think about it, he's the first recorded Christian death. Post Jesus' death.
Lazarus
Do you know what I mean?
Lazarus died, but he came back.
Yeah, he came back.
Yeah.
So, because, we talk about the stoning of Stephen and everything, but he was the first person who said, that we know of, who said to Jesus, I believe in you, you are the Son of God, you are the Messiah, save me.
But he wasn't,
And died.
It wasn't a martyr though. But it wasn't like
No, but he died as a
He didn't die
Christian,
because of his faith.
do you know? But he died in the state of being a New Testament Christian, we would say.
Yeah.
Because here's Jesus, I believe in him. So, and I guess we don't really have that example before him. I'm not saying that there weren't other people that met Jesus and died, and what happened to them after they died. I don't know, but it would have been before Jesus died. See, Jesus' death opened, it says, this is from the Psalms, open up the gates so the King of Glory may come in. Who is the King of Glory? And it's Jesus. Open up the gates because the King of Glory is coming in. Jesus did that. He opened up the gates. Anyway, this is a wonderful talk to have, you guys too, when we're celebrating the birth and the incarnation of our Lord. What a wonderful, I dare you to have this discussion around your Christmas dinner table. Let's talk about saints. Let's talk about Hades in the Old Testament now. Don't do that over Christmas dinner. Do it some other time. You wanted to say something, Natalie.
What book are we reading?
Okay, we are reading, so we're reading chapter 22 of Dorothy Mills, which I just gave you the reading guide. And you guys, I gave you an extra one last week. If you lost it, email me and I'll send you another one. And that finishes this book. So then the second semester, we will be reading the book of the Reformation, Renaissance and Reformation. And the other thing we are doing, we are reading the book In Freedom's Cause by G.A. Henty. I would like you to read the first 6 chapters 1 through 6. Now, we already have met Mr. Henty in The Dragon and the Raven, so you kind of know what to expect. This is the story of Scotland. And that actually comes in very handy. Here, let me see what, because I want to talk about Robin Hood too. Oh, holy cow. Okay, it's fine. Scotland had a rough relationship with England, shall we say. During the time when England was fighting in France, and Dorothy Mills mentions this, France had a habit of working with Scotland. So England goes to France, and then France sends messengers to Scotland saying, Scotland invade England from the north to make the English come back and deal with you. See, so they were working, they're on 2 sides of England, right? And they're working together, which irritates the English. That's probably it.
The messengers?
They probably sailed around. Yes, Natalie.
What's the book that we're reading after Dorothy Mills started at the time?
In Freedom's Cause.
No,
The book is Dorothy Mills, the book of the Renaissance and Reformation. It's on my book list.
What is In Freedom's Cause?
Okay, so Scotland often had English overlords. England was constantly trying to take over Scotland, to make them toe the line, right? To make them behave. You Scottish people, just settle down. Just let the English rule you, for crying out loud. Stop attacking our northern borders already. We're going to read the play Macbeth in the second semester, and this is the story of a Scottish king who's involves sending to England for help, all right? So we're going to hear this relationship. But the Scottish were often ruled by English overlords who were not very nice. And that's putting it really nicely. And they would try to rouse the people to throw out the English. But eventually there was a man, and his name was William Wallace. And William Wallace was tough, and he was liked, and he was good on the battlefield, and he rallied people to the cause, and he led the Scottish in a fight for freedom. I'm not going to tell you anything else about William Wallace or the Scottish fight for freedom, because that's what In Freedom's Cause is about, and I don't want to ruin anything that will happen in that book. All right? So this problem, the England-Scotland problem, isn't going to get solved until the early 1600s, when the Queen of England dies, and there's the best person to take the throne is her cousin, the King of Scotland. His name was James, and he is the James who commissioned the King James Bible. King James.
It's so funny.
It's considered some of the most beautiful writing ever. People often recommend, if you're going to memorize scripture, memorize King James, because it's gorgeous.
Wait, when do we meet next?
We meet the week after New Year's. So January 1st is a Saturday, so I think it's January 4th. All right? It's, Mariana, the calendar, there's a calendar on the website that tells.
Isn't it just the first Tuesday in January?
Yeah, the first Tuesday in January.
Oh, right.
So we don't meet next week, and we don't meet the week after.
Oh, right.
But we meet the week after that.
January 4th.
I think it's January 4th. Because I think Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and New Year's, because Christmas is a Saturday, so New Year's is a Saturday, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it'll be January 4th. But if you're not sure, email me, but you can, there's a calendar on the website you can go to. Okay, in the time we have left, I want to talk about this. So let's not visit the evils of Robin Hood so much, but I feel like I told my Wednesday kids that we had a rousing debate on whether or not, and on which the anti-Robin Hood side made a very good showing, I feel like. But hopefully the anti-Robin Hood side feels like there was some evidence that this sort of lifestyle comes back to haunt you, comes back to bite you eventually. I wanted to comment on a couple of things.
Wait, are you saying that? Wait, what do you mean?
Well, I will tell you what I mean. Okay, can I go in order, and then can you hold on to that for a minute? Okay, so Robin Hood and his men, a few of them, get called. We're all friends here at this table, the Robin Hood lovers and the Robin Hood haters, and we're just all friends. It's Christmas time. Be full of
We still have a week.
the
before
milk
it's
of
actually
human
Christmas.
kindness. Okay. So you don't have to be nice yet?
Nope.
Is that what you're saying? They get called to by the Queen Eleanor, Henry II's queen, to shoot in an archery tournament in which they show up, the king's archers. And the king said he promised to the queen he would give whoever it was safe passage.
Isn't that suspicious of him?
You would think so.
That she asked for that?
You would think so, but it is his wife, and she's asking nicely. And then he says, so that he finds out who they are, and they win, and he's embarrassed. Man, I wish I hadn't done that. I wish I hadn't promised them. The Bishop of Hereford. Remember the Bishop of Hereford? Who had been invited to a party in, Sherwood Forest, for which he paid. He says, "Oh, do you really feel that way? Forgive my boldness, your majesty, and believe that I have naught but the good of England and your majesty's desirings at heart. But what would it boot, though my gracious lord did root up every tree in Sherwood? So what? You're going to wait till the 40 days passes and then you're going to go dig up every tree? Don't you think they're just going to run to another forest?" He says, "Far be it from me to point out the way to one so clear-sighted as your majesty. But were I king of England, I should look upon the matter in this wise. I have promised my queen, let us say, that for 40 days the cunningest rogue in all England shall have freedom to come and go. But, lo, I find this outlaw is in my grasp. Shall I then foolishly cling to a promise so hastily given? Suppose that I had promised to do her majesty's bidding, whereupon she bade me to slay myself. Should I then shut my eyes and run blindly on my sword? Thus would I argue within myself. Moreover, I would say unto myself, a woman knoweth not of the great things appertaining to state government. And likewise, I know a woman is ever prone to take up a fancy, even as she would pluck a daisy from the roadside and then throw it away when the savour is gone. Therefore, though she hath taken a fancy to this outlaw, it will soon wane and be forgotten. As for me, I have the greatest villain in all England in my grasp. Shall I then open my hand and let him slip betwixt my fingers? Thus, your majesty, would I say to myself, were I the king of England."
I love how he's like, I'm not going to tell you what to do.
Yes.
But here's
Exactly what you should do. Exactly.
Not me, and I was in the exact position you're in. This is exactly what I would do.
And-
Not alive.
And he listens. So I want to just to highlight, the bishop has basically told the king, oh, you can totally make promises and then renege on them. Totally fine. Doesn't matter what you
It's
promise.
to his wife.
It's fine.
Sure.
Just blow it off. You have no good reason. Just blow off your promises. So if you notice in the reading, some of the court, Sir Richard Partington, that came to get them, he's embarrassed. He's embarrassed on behalf of the king when they head out for Robin Hood. Like, the king promised. This makes him look really, really bad.
That is grounds for divorce.
So they catch up with him. All right. And Sir Robert, this is Sir Robert Lee, no relation to Sir Richard of the Lee. All right. And no relation to Robert E. Lee
Yeah, well,
either. He says, that the queen is warning him that, remember he tried to get home and then he came back again because he couldn't get through to Sherwood Forest, and he came back. It's like the queen has gone to the king and said, look, you're going to keep your promise. You're a jerk. I don't know what she said, but I'm sure it was jerk was involved. And he says this, you may thank thy patron saint that thou hast such a good friend in our noble queen. Let this peril that thou hast passed through teach thee 2 lessons. First, be more honest. If you weren't living the life you lived, you wouldn't be in this danger right now. Second, be not so bold in thy comings and goings. A man that walketh in the darkest as thou dost may escape for a time, but in the end he will surely fall into the pit. Thou hast put thy head in the angry lion's mouth, and yet thou hast escaped by a miracle. Try it not again. So, in other words, there's a little bit of a chastisement for Robin Hood. If you weren't living the way you live, so he is an outlaw. So what if his guys lived in the forest and ate deer and berries and stuff? They didn't steal from anybody. Probably the sheriff would eventually be ticked off and want to hunt him down. But he wouldn't be stirring up so much upon himself. Do you know what I mean? So much trouble as he is when he's waylaying people and robbing them. And then have you noticed? He gets bolder and bolder. Like they're just trotting around the countryside, just doing whatever, despite some close calls.
They went to that parade thing, and the king was really upset because they weren't afraid of them.
Yes. And so Sir Robert says, maybe you should tone it down a little bit. Think about it, because you just came this close, buddy. All right. So I hope that you feel he was somewhat chastised for his bad behavior. So he goes. So the second thing I wanted to highlight was this guy of Gisborne. What is the difference? Keep checking. Oh, shoot. What is the difference between the Sheriff of Nottingham and Guy of Gisborne?
The Sheriff of Nottingham, I don't know. I mean, the Guy of Gisborne is, I don't know what his, okay, whatever. He is way more of a jerk, sort of. Well, he's also I don't know. He's just
Okay, so this is I put this down, but I'm gonna look it up again. Okay, so it's the second to last flag.
he's braver.
It's the third to last flag.
I thought the sheriff was the first one to die.
Yeah, we all love that.
Shoot. Okay, I can't find. It says that Robin Hood. To all this, so the Guy of Gisborne's like, I kill anybody I want. I killed a bunch of people. I kill Robin Hood, and he's disgusting. He's got this animal skin cloak, and to all this, Robin listened, and as he listened, his gorge rose, which means he wants to throw up. Well, he knew of this Guy of Gisborne, and of all his bloody and murderous deeds that he had done in Herefordshire. He loathed the very presence of the man. I guess what I'm fishing for is the Sheriff of Nottingham is corrupt. Guy of Gisborne is just evil. He's just evil. And notice something. Robin, when he kills him, first of all, he kills him in self-defense. Second of all, he doesn't have a lot of qualms about it. But notice after he ends up going with Richard to the Crusades and he comes back, it says in the book he's not the same man he was. He's not the same man he was. He's seen a lot of bloodshed. He's not that man who said, I killed somebody once and I don't ever want to do that again. And so he ends up in a big scuffle, battle in Sherwood Forest in which the sheriff is killed. Goes to his cousin, a nun at Kirklees Abbey, who then kills him.
Okay. This is the lamest way for him to die. He died because
I
of
know,
woman made him
I know.
bleed to death.
I know.
Like,
Okay,
kinda
why
just-
So
a
again,
woman?
He's
because
not a
for
woman.
for a
I'm saying
warrior
he's
it
fine,
would have
yeah,
been.
it's
For a warrior it would have
He's a
been in
warrior
that time.
What? I'm sorry.
That's
He had
way better than being killed.
But he
No,
didn't. He didn't
But like,
want to die.
yeah, he didn't want to die.
He doesn't like,
I mean,
oh,
like,
you'll be killed by the
he didn't do it on purpose.
So I guess my point is his story does not have a happy ending, Addison. This life of thievery and outlawry does not end well. It is kind of sad. And even if we're on the team Addison, the anti Robin Hood faction,
think it's a bad
we
term to die.
we still feel it's sad that he's brought down because his cousin is afraid that now she'll fall out of favor with the king, John, and have her place taken away. It's selfishness. Selfishness kills him.
He should have died. If he was gonna die, he should have died in battle against someone.
Yes.
Like
Shot
not
by
being.
the arrow.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry. We ran out of time. I wanted to talk more about Guy of Gisborne. I'm going to turn this off